Do you go a day without your phone? How about a week or more? While many of us are dependent on this thing, many of the apps on here are dependent on us. Tech expert Dave Hatter is zooming in this morning to talk about some of the most data-hungry apps. Good morning, Dave.
Thanks for having me on.
So a recent study examined app privacy reports, and it named the most invasive. So we have a list of the top 5 we're going to put up on the screen. And they are probably what you would imagine. Amazon and Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, all of those apps are ones that I use all the time. What does it mean by being the most invasive, Dave?
Yeah, Sheila, this is a good question. I think it's important for people to understand, just because an app collects a lot of data doesn't necessarily mean it's nefarious, but you do have to understand where that data is going and understand that a lot of these large data breaches and so forth are allowing that data to get out. So it's used against you in ways you can't anticipate and, in some cases for identity theft and fraud. So the bottom line is this, Sheila, if you're using a quote free app, it's because they're monetizing your data. You are the product, not the customer. Again, not necessarily nefarious, but it's all the standard companies you see on that list, because think about it. Every company you showed in that list, what is their product? Well, it's you, because they're giving you free apps and platforms because they're collecting your data. And when you look at the study, there's a bunch of different categories they looked at. The two that I think are the most disturbing, and those are the top apps that collect in these, are data that's shared with third parties, because once it's out of their control, you don't know what they're going to do with it. And then data shared for, quote, other uses. Well, what the heck is that?
Right.
So again, before you download an app, this is something you should take into consideration.
Yeah, and when you download it, you're basically giving them permission, and then it's up to you to put the settings on it and things like that. Another in the top 20 were one used by kids, Roblox, also Candy Crush. A lot of people play games on them. What kinds of things do they want to know about us when they gather this data? I know that Facebook had a setting where it was watching what you were shopping for on your phone. I turned off that one recently.
Yeah, Sheila. So that's another important question to ask. And the thing I always like to suggest to people, you can try to read the privacy policy. It's usually very long, a lot of legal mumbo jumbo, difficult to understand. My advice to people, before you download any app, and also keep in mind, a lot of these data intensive apps also have a web interface you can use where you can have a lot more control over the data they're collecting. If you're using the Facebook web interface, the original Facebook interface, in a really locked down web browser like Firefox or Brave, the amount of information they can collect is really only going to be whatever you give them.
That's a good tip. That's a good tip. Well,
versus installing that app on your phone.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You also say that if you have apps on your phone that you're not using, you should delete them. Why is that?
Well, because if it's on there, because you've given it permissions, and a lot of these apps basically want to collect everything. If you look at the app privacy policy, go to the Apple App Store, pick any app. Apple requires them to tell what they're going to collect. Most of the time it's shocking. Why does a flashlight need to know your location? Why does Candy Crush need to know your texts, right?
Right.
So if you look at that privacy policy, you'll get some insight. And the reason to delete these things, Sheila, is because if it's on there, it can potentially collect this information behind the scenes, even if you're not using it. If it's not getting updated, it's a potential security problem as well. So yeah, as a best practice, less apps is better, especially if you don't use something, get rid of it.
Real quick, does getting rid of it, does deleting it, does that solve the problem?
Well, unless it's truly malicious, yes, it will. But keep in mind, any information it's collected, any information you've explicitly shared, once it's out there on their servers, whatever they're doing with it, whatever third parties they've shared it with, it's out there. There's no way to reclaim that.
Yeah. So I guess number one, know what settings you have to have set if you are going to use those apps. And I thought the web browser was a good tip too. Dave Hatter, always, thank you so much.
Sure, you can stop watching, but let's be honest, you want to know more. Tap the links, or even better, click subscribe to stay in the know.